Lee Forrester with another episode of Metal on Metal. Today we'll be taking a look at a replay of a late-stage playtest game of Rostov 41. There's a lot of things I like about this game. First of all, it's wide open, as you will see. I'm currently playing a game of Stalingrad Pocket, slowly, and that game is not quite as wide open. Lots of counters, lots of stuff to look at. This one has lots of white space, as it were. And because you roll for initiative every turn in this game, you will have the turn flips, which can be anticipated or dreaded, depending, much like you have in the OCS. That adds a lot of replay ability to this game because a certain string of turn flips can really change the whole course of the game. And as you learn to play both sides and learn to develop your approaches, particularly to the beginning of the game, the first 4 turns are really important. You need to be able to flex with different kinds of turn flips, so there's a lot to learn. You'll also see that the game bogs down quite a bit after the very rapid open because of the mud, the Rasputitsa, I think it's called, or something like that, Rasputitsa maybe. And that also has a big effect on the play. So the opening first 3-4 turns are very wide open. Then you have a much slower slog through turn 9, 10-ish. The weather clears up then, and then a hard frost sets in. And those all have different effects on the game. So let's take a look at the beginning situation. As you can see, the Soviets are deployed along here, along the Meuse River particularly, and they have some stragglers out here as the rapid German advance sort of got past them. And the Soviets will have to decide what they're going to do with these units. Are they going to try to rescue them? Are they going to try to make a play for Stalino or simply run? Those are important questions that aren't totally answered to my satisfaction yet. So let's take a look. Soviets begin on turn 1, and they decide to be aggressive, to play these as speed bumps to try to slow the German mechanized forces here, and also to try to make a hold of Stalino and delay the Germans that way. These units, a few units, are coming back this way to the line. The Germans, for their part, on turn 1, decide to deal with the speed bumps via overrun and some artillery. You can see that they're lined up that way. They're not making a play here yet because they'll have reinforcements on turns 2 and 3 to help out with that. And on the Meuse River front, they're lining up for turn 2 to see what happens. Naturally, the big question is who has initiative on turn 2? The answer is the Germans. So they decide to attack here into the river line, try to make deep penetrations. They use some artillery support to soften it up and hope to exploit further. And up in Stalino, rather than going right for the city with their mechanized forces, they're going to head to the east and perhaps pincer them, or perhaps just wait for the infantry that's coming up to take care of the job. Here we can see after exploitation, the Germans actually were able to overrun into Stalino and take some of that with their mechanized forces. And here they blew through the line, overran some more stuff, and made some deep penetrations with some of their tanks and recon units all the way out here. So that was a rapid change you saw from turn 1 to turn 2. The Germans were able to exploit that. And that's a key question for me with the Soviets is how do you handle this line? Do you defend it? If so, how long? If you just run, the German mechanized troops are able to chase you down pretty well too, so it's not an easy answer. This part of the map is also quite important because it controls this road, which goes from Rostov all the way to Stalino. And the Germans will want to control this if possible, but it's not so hard for the Soviets to block. So you'll find out in play that often some maneuvering happens out here as both sides with limited resources try to maintain control of that important road net. The Soviets, for their part, are running. They're trying to clear up back to here with their troops. Whatever was out here is now back in Rostov, and reinforcements are approaching. Turn 3, Germans continue with the initiative. Up in the north, they've got Stalino mostly in hand. You see the reinforcements I mentioned here, and they're going to be stringing up here. There will be some Soviets appearing from the north map very soon, so the Germans are getting ready to deal with that. They've set out some screening units to keep this important area in check. Whether this is a good use or not of these motorized troops, I'm not sure, but it's what happened. And they're lining up over here. They've surrounded Rostov, attacking with artillery, as you can see, trying to assault their way in as soon as possible. Turn 3 for the Soviets, mostly turtling in these cities down here, and reinforcements approaching this way. Turn 4, Germans continue with the initiative. They decide to deal the Soviet units up in the north an attack, trying to reduce them before too many get on. moving into Stalino to take it through attrition, and then you can see the assault on Rostov has begun in earnest with some mech and other recon units out here screening from a Soviet counterattack. The Soviets did very little on turn 4 other than staying in place. The Germans move on to turn 5, more attacks up here, and it might have been a good idea for the Soviets to simply gather their troops in the rough terrain and let the Germans have this. It's a hard call because the troops have limited mobility. The German mechanized troops are not as effective in the mud, but there's still a lot of them. And you can see the assault on the city is continuing. The Soviets are now, unfortunately for them, cut off as the Germans snuck a recon unit back here and cut off their supply across this river line. And they're just waiting for replacements to arrive and reinforcements. German turn 6, more of the same, trying to maintain this area here. New Soviet units to deal with. The city is still under attack. And we see more in turn 6, more Soviets coming up. They're going to threaten this unit right here that's cut these from supply. We'll see if it's in enough time. And at least the Soviets' forces in the north are developing, as you can see here. Turn 7. Germans are almost done with Rostov. Reinforcements approaching. It's all quite slow because of the mud. Germans decide to put up a screen. Can't do much about that. Seeing if they can maybe make a play for this. It's pretty tough though, because these mechanized units have too many jobs. There's this area, there's this and that, and they're holding back to see what happens. So, Soviets in turn 7. You can see it's still a screen up there. They decide to commit their reinforcements, making a play to try to relieve Rostov. Germans go first again, so they're able to continue the attack, put a screen up against the Soviets, and you see that they're lining up here to perhaps do some damage, but the Soviets are strong enough where it's not going to be so easy for them to do that. Soviets in turn 8, making some aggressive moves this way. You can see an attack has actually developed over here now finally, but the Rostov is just about empty. Just this one stack left. The Soviets were able to clear this out, but it's not looking good. Soviets get a flip, turn 9, develop an attack here, do some damage. They're trying to work this way too. Did some DGs, as you can see, but perhaps not enough at this stage of the game. They took some heavy losses in the first part. And the Germans, for their part, defensive in the north here, but they're able to take over Rostov and release all these mechanized units to counter the Soviet thrust this way. It was about a one-turn barrier. If the Soviets had had one more turn or had been one turn earlier, they might have gotten in there and kept Rostov. Turn 10, more Germans attacking over here, even though they've got some weather. It's during this time, turn 10 to 12, it's pretty good weather for mechanized operations. The freeze hasn't happened yet. And so the Germans are still looking pretty good. The supply problems are not plaguing them. And the Soviets decide to continue defensive here and to withdraw that. And I think, as we'll see in just the next minute, that was pretty much it. The inability to rescue these guys or to develop a common front here really hurt the Soviets in this game. Turn 11, Germans continuing their assault. Developing a river line. There's going to be more Soviets coming here. The river will freeze, allowing them to cross, but it looks like the Germans have this in hand. Not much happening up here. Pretty much a stalemate. Soviets turn 11, don't see that they can do much. Develop a defensive line, await developments. They're going to hope to infiltrate across the frozen, soon-to-be frozen river this way and threaten the German rear. Turn 12, they do so, start moving this way across the river, moving up this way, and decide to send some troops for another play for Stalino, which had been left open inadvertently. But the Germans are able to send mechanized troops back to deal with the threat, and here they also screen through the river, and at this point we realize that there's no way the Soviets have enough at this point to break through the Germans, so this is pretty much going to be the game. The Germans will hold Rostov for a victory. So that was one play. This game plays very differently each time. And so what I appreciate, as I mentioned before, is that with the turn flips, you have to learn to deal with various situations, but there's not so many moving parts that it's impossible. So it's a nice challenge, and I think experienced players can get through a game of this in an evening without much of a problem.